are there any special tactics for finding jobs in these companies? Oh yeah, contacts, definitely. Particularly if you're talking about spin-outs from universities. I mean, the first thing you should be doing is talking to your supervisors, to other lecturers, and find out who their industrial contacts are. Who are the people who are sponsoring research at your university? Who do they work for? Are there any names that you could give, they could give you to make a direct contact? I think there's another interesting way of trying to target these SMEs, particularly if you're wanting something which is related to your research. Two tactics. One of them is search the patents registers. Your university library will probably be able to give you access to searches for patents. And obviously, if you're in academia, when you've got research which is innovative, you publish it. If you're in the private sector, you patent it. So if you can search on the terms which are related to your degree or to your postgraduate degrees, then you may be able to pick out organisations who are working in exactly the right area and then target those directly. The one other really good search engine I've come across, which has been put together by, again, another University of Manchester, I think our UMIP organisation, is called Innovation Park Search. Can't remember the exact web address off the top of my head, but do a search on Innovation Park Search, and that's a kind of a specialist Google search of all the spin-out companies, innovation parks, science parks and so on, which are spread around the UK. You can type in particular keywords and it will try and pick out organisations who are publishing things on their own website, maybe under these innovation park overarching websites. And that's, again, another good way of trying to find the small high-tech spin-out companies who are in your field. Okay. Right, another one. This is my second MSc in the UK. Previous one was not really related to my first degree, but it provided me with a lot of knowledge. Do you think I'm going to end up being overqualified? I think it's going to depend how you present it. You have to, there is a bit of a temptation in the UK to be a bit anti-intellectual. I know that in some countries it's seen as very positive to have multiple MScs, but it's not particularly common in the UK. So you do start out with a bit of a disadvantage that the initial assumption, I guess as I was mentioning earlier on in the presentation, that the initial assumption is that you didn't want a job, so you did another MSc. So I think it's going to be down to you to convince them why the second MSc was really important. If you went straight from one MSc to another MSc, then again that is going to be absolutely critical. If you had did one MSc, did some work, and then did another MSc, then that's really not quite such a difficult position, I think, to justify. Okay. But yes, it is going to be not as easy maybe in some countries. Right, I'm looking at one here from Michael. Michael says, I'm currently writing up PhD for submission and looking around for jobs outside of academia. Interested in possibly working abroad. Do you have any advice? I'm also wondering if there was a popular recruitment time. Okay, let's deal with the last one first. So is there a popular recruitment time? Well, I think there's unpopular recruitment times. I wouldn't start looking for a job in December. I had one of the major UK newspapers quote some statistics which I put on my blog to prove that graduate jobs were plummeting without pointing out that they'd just taken the December figures, which actually plummeted every year because everybody's thinking about Christmas. I'd also probably avoid doing a major search in the summer. I think that obviously, you know, there are a lot of people who do go on leave in the summer. If you're going to, you know, if you want to go work in France, then you avoid August because there's nobody there. There's certainly nobody in Paris, no Parisians anyway. So you need to just think logically about when people are not going to be around. But the rest of the time, there's no one particular time to recruit. In terms of looking for working abroad, I think it depends on if you're wanting to, if you've got the ability to go and work abroad legally. Obviously, most countries have various restrictions on who can get visas. So if you're a UK citizen, possibly from your name you may be, who's looking to work in the EU, that isn't going to be a problem, but you do need to think about language issues. So first of all, it's thinking about the legality of working overseas. Then thinking about the language issues. If you want to apply to jobs outside your home country, you should be aware that every country has its own application conventions. So a CV in the UK is very different to a CV in the USA. A CV in France is different to a CV in Belgium. One will have a photograph on, one may not have a photograph on. So you need to apply in the style and certainly the language which is appropriate to the country that you're wanting to work in. So hopefully, I think if you've got access to your university career service, then they may have information on things like the Global Resume Handbook. We've got one of those at Manchester, which gives you some information about different types of CVs and applications in different countries. The Prospects website, the one I mentioned earlier, prospects.ac.uk, also has information on applying in different countries, and it's quite good in terms of mentioning whether you need particular whether there are any visa restrictions in countries as well. Excuse me. So hopefully that will give you something to go on. So I have a look at prospects.ac.uk, and that will give you chapter and verse on how you can look for jobs in other countries. Dan, do we have time for one more?
I think if you're happy to get on, Elizabeth, I think that we definitely have time to squeeze one more in.
Okay, right, let's have another look at one there. Okay, right, so, okay, this is a nice one. Employers are either looking for graduates or experienced people. PhDs are not simply graduates, and many end up finishing their PhD not being very confident in the skills they've acquired, and they're not very experienced either. So what do you apply for? Everything or nothing. Okay, I think this is one possibly it's an issue about confidence here. I think you are experienced. You're experienced in all those things mentioned. I think having confidence in your abilities is really, really important. If a job is advertised and they say very clearly that they want 5 years or 10 years work experience in a particular field and you don't have that experience, then it's probably not a good idea to waste your time applying for that. However, if they're talking about 2 or 3 years experience and you've got, say, research experience which is pretty similar, then there's probably not a lot to be lost by trying to apply for those. I'll give you a real example. We saw a job advertised on a big pharmaceutical company's website which asked for 3 years experience in a particular field, a technical job. They couldn't fill that job, and they came back to us and asked us to advertise a job with exactly the same wording, apart from the 3 years experience had been replaced by a PhD in that topic, which I think is a really graphic example that sometimes a PhD, the experience you've got, particularly if you go for a research job, is definitely worthwhile. Definitely worthwhile applying. Also, if you go back to what I was saying earlier about if you want to get into some of these fast-track management jobs, don't get distracted by the fact that they are open to graduates as well as PhDs. I think in some cases you just got to be able to, grit your teeth and go for those graduate jobs and convince them that you have so much potential that they'd be mad not to take you, without sounding like you're better than a graduate. You're somehow downplaying the other graduates. Particularly important because the person you're probably going to be recruited by is very likely to be an undergraduate rather than a PhD. And so if you start telling them about how undergraduates really can't do very much, they're not going to feel very impressed by that. So I think you've got both of options open to you. You can go for the graduate jobs, but it's about convincing them that you're not unhappy about that option. Or you can go for the experienced jobs by really, I think, building up your confidence about what you've got, what you've actually managed to do as a PhD. I'll give you one tip. If you want to try and remind yourself just how far you've come as a PhD, find a nice undergraduate somewhere in your lab if you're working in a lab, or just somebody who's only got an undergraduate degree, and start telling them about what you've been doing for the last 3 or 4 years. And watch their eyes as they go wide open, they look, the jaw drops at just exactly what you've done. You want an awestruck undergraduate to make you feel good about what you've done as a PhD. if you do have a career service, or you're in an organisation, a university where there are training and skills training people, then see if you can contact them and see if they offer any workshops or courses or training or individual advice about how you can start to evidence the skills that you got, and to try and get you to think about the types of skills that you have acquired, because you really acquire so much which you just take for granted, and I think it would be quite a shame not to be able to use that. Okay, I think we're just about done. So Dan, is that okay for you?
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Elizabeth. I think that it sounded like you were enjoying the session just as much as I enjoyed listening to it, which I really hope was the case. And it's precisely your kind of expertise that is the reason that at LinkHigher, alongside all of the opportunities and advice that we put on our own website, that we always say to the postgraduates that we work with to get down to their local careers service and speak to somebody face-to-face, because to get this level of interaction.
Thanks very much, Dan.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank everyone who attended and participated today. The questions really flooded in very, very quickly. I'm very sorry if there's any questions that we haven't been able to get through. And if anybody has a really burning desire to have their question answered or thinks of a question after the session, if you would like to email it to info@linkhigher.com, we'll do our very best to get an answer to you as soon as we possibly can.
Can I also make one thank you as well to Helen, who's been sat next to me, busy passing me post-it notes, so I didn't have to try and read all this screen of the questions. It's been absolutely invaluable.
Thank you very much, Helen. Thank you very, very much. And yeah, in closing, I'd just like to remind everybody that this is the first in an entire series of webinars, which is going to be running throughout the year. There was a question in today's session about SMEs, which led on to contacts and networking. And incidentally, next month's webinar is going to be with Richard Carruthers from Southampton University Careers Service, who's going to be talking about effective networking as a postgraduate. So definitely something to join for. And to keep an eye on the webinars which are coming up, you can go to linkhigher.com/webinars, and you'll be able to see the events as and when they're confirmed. So with that, I'd like to thank Elizabeth one more time and her glamorous assistant Helen for making this session possible, and wish everybody a pleasant evening and great success in their future careers.
Thank you. Goodbye.